We are, through cultural evolution, actually creating our own eschatology. You know, Plato said if God didn't exist, man would invent him. Well, there are many different kinds of gods for humanity to invent. And one of the most satisfying, I think, is this eschatological hypostatization that lies outside of history and informs it. This is what the seers are reacting to. This is what inspires the careers of the prophets. And it is, I maintain, what shamanism is about. We've offered many definitions of shamanism here. Here is another one. A shaman is someone who has seen the end. That's all. Once you've seen the end, it's like going with a friend to a movie that you've seen and they haven't. You have a completely different relationship to it. You are anticipating their enjoyment of it, their moments of fear, anticipation, and pleasure, but you are above them looking down. You have already seen the end. You know the punchline. And every shaman in every culture gains his or her humor, balance, healing ability, wisdom, if you will, by having participated in the transhistorical, eschatological object. And modernity just denies this. The theory of history taught in the universities is what's called the trendlessly fluctuating theory. That just means war, revolution, reform, revolution, war, war, reform, revolution. It's like a random walk across the landscape with a steady increase of technique, rising Malthusian pressures, but that's all. It's because there is no place for the transcendent in the scheme of rationalism as we inherit it from the late, from the Enlightenment. But in fact, if what the psychedelic experience argues, what our dreams argue, what our good sense argues, is that it is not business as usual on this planet. And history is not a random walk that has tens of millennia yet to run ahead of it. That actually we have set off processes that finalize our time upon the earth, finalize the duration of our present cultural mode. We are going to have to fish or cut bait. We have built this into our myths about our world, that it has an ending, and so it shall. And I think shamanism anticipates this superhuman condition out of which we arose in ilio tempore, before history, and into which we shall be subsumed at the end of the historical peregrination. The myth of our culture is the myth of the prodigal son. We made the descent into physis, into the world of matter, into the well of the world, if you wish. Our job to recover a piece of lost information about the nature of the soul and then return to the tribal family, to the shamanic, prehistoric and post-historic mode, where then the fruits of history will be not thanatoptic in their consequences, but transformative. Anticipation of the future.
So I'll follow on that. I'm thinking of the second book of the I Ching and asking that question about reversibility of time, going both ways. And also, in that second book, there's an interesting comment on the contrast or complementarity of creativity and transformation. Was to suggest that they're processes that flow counter to one another. Could you?
Well, I think the I Ching is a special obsessive interest of mine, specifically the kinds of things you're talking about. There is this body of commentary that is pre-Confucian, late Zhou, early Han, that is puzzling in the present context of the I Ching. And I think this is what you're referring to. And there's a place where it says, the backward running numbers refer to the future, the forward running numbers refer to the past. And you say, well, what does this mean? There are no backward running or forward running numbers. There are just 64 numbers. It's because the I Ching as we possess it today is a piece of broken machinery. It is actually an extremely sophisticated understanding of time, couched in an intellectual and epistemic domain that we can barely cognize because it arises out of a different kind of language stratum. But really, I think being is a kind of interference pattern where the forward-flowing casuistry of what are called prepotent situations, like the rolling downhill of a ball bearing, the momentum of happenstance, where the momentum of happenstance meets this more mysterious carrier wave from the future, and together they form an interference pattern. I remember I was very impressed where the Amazon River flows into the Rio Negro. These are both huge rivers. They're each about 12 miles across where they meet each other. And so consequently, they are like two waves coming together. And where they meet, they form a standing wave. And you can actually sail up to this bump in the river. And it's quite large. I mean, it's 5 or 6 feet high. And you can sail along it. It's like a ridge in the middle of the river. And you can see that all the material is in motion, but the wave itself is stable. It is what is called a standing wave. And I think that this is what being is. Science has attempted to give a very full account of the forward-moving momentum of happenstance. But we deny that there is appetition for the future, or that the future is somehow shaping events. And in our denial, we are then left with a blind spot in our account of reality. I'm going to teach a 5-day workshop at Esalen the week after Thanksgiving, in which psychedelics will barely be mentioned. And the I Ching and its mathematical dynamics will be the entire focus of this, because I take this notion very seriously and have worked it out in excruciating detail, because I think that the wave form of the Tao can be known and was known, and that there are technologies of interior observation, which is what yoga is. But Taoism in its early and incipient phase was a similar kind of technology that allow real insight into the future. The future is not determined. If it were, thought would be meaningless. But it has, it's like water flowing over a dry arroyo. The water takes the shape of its container, and the water of historical happenstance flows into the vessel of the future, which already exists, and takes its shape.
Comment on the opposition of creativity and transformation in that same chapter?
Yeah, I'm not so sure about... you see those as opposed?
I thought that one led to the other, but in reading that, it seems that there's some question, and I'm puzzled by it.
Well, I think you have to read the I Ching with a grain of salt. I mean, why does before completion come after completion? There are a number of puns. I mean, it can be read as very deep, but not without humor, I think. And it is, Taoistic thinking is inherently contradictory. The coincidentia oppositorum used to create cognitive dissonance. So you never have the satisfaction of logical closure that you get in Hegel or somebody like that. You're always left not sure, not knowing. Ralph, do you want to sum this up? I got carried away here. I thought my watch said 4:30 and it said 5 o'clock.
Well, we said we were going to stop at 5, so I don't think there's any way to try to sum it up.